Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Okay, go ahead and grab your window seat because today we are going on a totally spectacular virtual flight. We're taking a top to bottom tour across one of the most incredibly diverse landscapes on the planet, India. From these freezing, towering peaks all the way down to tropical, coral-fringed islands, we're going to explore how the literal, physical shape of this land completely dictates its life, its culture, and its history. Let's dive in. To really wrap our heads around the massive scale of what we're looking at, we need to start way, way up, like in orbit. Back in 1984, Rakesh Sharma, the very first Indian astronaut in space, was actually talking on the radio with the Prime Minister at the time, Indira Gandhi. When she asked him, "How does India look from space?" he fired back with a famous line from an old poem, Sare Jahan Se Acha, which translates to better than the whole world. That breathtaking, top-down perspective is exactly the mindset we want to keep for our journey today. Here is our flight path for today. First, a bird's eye view. Then, the mighty Himalayan mountains. Third, fertile plains and arid deserts. Fourth, the ancient peninsular plateau. And finally, vibrant coasts and islands. Starting right off with Section 1, a bird's eye view of India. India is the 7th largest country in the world, so, the scale we're dealing with here is absolutely massive. What's really fascinating is this term you hear a lot, the Indian subcontinent. I mean, India is part of Asia, sure, but it, along with neighbors like Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, Sri Lanka, and Myanmar, basically forms its own distinct mini-continent. Why? Because it's literally walled off by these giant natural boundaries. You've got towering mountains to the north, the scorching Sar Desert to the west, and huge oceans, the Arabian Sea, Bay of Bengal, and the Indian Ocean, just wrapping around the bottom. Those boundaries seal the subcontinent off, and that isolation has played a massive, crucial role in shaping its totally unique climate and culture. Moving on to Section 2, the mighty Himalayan mountains. Heading to our first stop in the frozen north, just look at this. You can see the actual curve of the Earth. These mountains literally seem to scrape the sky. In fact, tons of these peaks are over 8,000 meters high. Geographers actually call them the 8,000ers. And this gigantic wall of rock stretches across 6 different countries. But they aren't just a physical barrier. They're an absolute lifeline. Every summer, the melting snow feeds huge river systems like the Ganga, the Indus, and the Brahmaputra. Because they provide drinking and farming water to literally hundreds of millions of people, the Himalayas are often called the water tower of Asia. Now here is a mind-blowing fact. These mountains are ancient, right? Well, yeah, but they're also super active. The Indian tectonic plate is actually still smashing into Asia today. It's moving slowly, about 5 centimeters a year. To put that into perspective, that is actually slower than your hair grows, but because of that relentless pushing, the Himalayas are growing taller by about 5 millimeters every single year. It sounds tiny, I know, but over a millennium, that adds up to 5 whole meters of brand new height. Nature is crazy. The Himalayas aren't just one solid wall either. They're sort of stacked into 3 distinct ranges. First, right at the top, you have the Himadri, or the Greater Himalayas. These are those brutal, rugged, snow-covered giants like Everest. Life up there is incredibly tough. But moving south, you step down into the Himachal, the lower Himalayas. The weather here is a lot nicer, supporting gorgeous forests and famous hill stations like Darjeeling. Finally, you hit the Shivalik Hills, the outer Himalayas. These are rolling, dense green hills that act as a transition zone, right down into the flat plains. And this incredible landscape perfectly explains the name. Himalaya actually comes from 2 ancient Sanskrit words, Hima, which means snow, and Alaya, which means abode. So literally, the abode of snow. And it's not just a physical home. These mountains are deeply sacred, packed with temples and monasteries that draw people from all over the world. Which brings us to Section 3, fertile plains and arid deserts. Dropping down from the snowy peaks, we slam right into 2 totally extreme environments, sitting basically side by side. First, the Gangetic Plains. As those rivers we talked about rush down the mountains, they drag a ton of rich minerals with them and dump them right here. The result? Incredibly fertile soil that is just a dream for agriculture. Because of that, a massive chunk of India's population lives right here. But then, right next door in the west, spanning across Rajasthan, you've got the Thar Desert. It's a complete 180. It's an arid, brutal natural barrier with scorching days, freezing nights, and barely any water. Surviving there takes some serious human ingenuity. It's wild seeing 2 completely different worlds practically touching. All right, continuing our flight south to Section 4, the ancient peninsular plateau. Real quick, let's just clarify what a peninsula actually is. It's simply a piece of land surrounded by water on three sides. And the whole central and southern part of India is exactly that. It's this massive, incredibly old, triangular chunk of land bordered by the Arabian Sea on the left, the Bay of Bengal on the right, and the vast Indian Ocean down at the very tip. Now, this massive central highland is known as the Deccan Plateau, and it's bookended by two mountain ranges called the Ghats. The Western Ghats run along the west coast, and they're like a tall, unbroken, steep green wall. They are literally so packed with unique plants and animals that they're a UNESCO World Heritage Site. On the flip side, the Eastern Ghats are much lower, more like a series of broken, rolling hills. And sandwiched right in the middle is the huge, flat, rocky plateau. Just look at the drama of this landscape. Jog Falls in Karnataka perfectly shows how water just plummets off the steep, rocky edges of the plateau. Now, here is a really cool geographic quirk. The entire Deccan Plateau is actually tilted. It leans slightly toward the east. And because of gravity, major rivers like the Godavari and the Krishna have no choice but to flow eastwards straight across the plateau into the Bay of Bengal. Meanwhile, just a few, like the Narmada, flow west. And these massive, steep waterfalls, India actually harnesses them to generate a ton of hydroelectric power. But don't let the word plateau fool you into thinking it's just dry rocks. The dense forests of places like Chhattisgarh show just how lush and vibrant this area gets. This ancient geological core is absolutely essential to India's economy. It is completely loaded with minerals, really productive farmland, and huge forests that support incredibly diverse tribal communities. Okay, final leg of the journey, Section 5, vibrant coasts and islands. Following those rivers all the way to the ocean, we see something super interesting. They behave totally differently depending on the coast. On the steep west coast, rivers basically just crash straight into the sea, forming estuaries. But on the east coast, the land is flatter, so the rivers slow way down. They spread out and drop all the mud and sand they've been carrying, creating these huge fan-shaped landforms called deltas. Rivers like the Mahanadi and the Kaveri build massive, insanely fertile deltas on the east coast, which, as you can guess, are perfect for farming. For our very last stop, we are flying offshore to check out India's two main archipelagos. And just like everything else we've seen, they are total opposites. Over in the Arabian Sea to the west, you have Lakshadweep. It's a tiny cluster of just 36 islands, and get this, they are made entirely out of coral. Then, way over in the Bay of Bengal to the east, you've got the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. This is a huge chain of over 500 islands, and they were born from fiery volcanoes. Both chains are super important strategically, and they give India this massive marine playground for research and conservation. So what is the big takeaway from all this flying around today? From the 8,000-meter frozen peaks down into those river-fed plains and harsh deserts, across the tilted ancient plateaus, and out to the coral reefs, all of this diversity isn't just pretty scenery. It literally creates distinct climates, different soils, and unique environments. And that physical reality on the ground completely shapes the plants, the animals, the jobs, and the incredibly vibrant cultures of the millions of people living on the subcontinent. Which leaves us with a fun question to ponder. We've just seen how dramatically the land dictates everything in India. So take a second and look around you. How does the geography of your own hometown, the hills, the flatlands, the weather, the nearest river or ocean, how does that dictate your daily life, your culture, the food you eat? It's a pretty fascinating way to view the world, right? Well, thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today, and hey, keep exploring.